In this tutorial, we're trying to achieve a really nice, bright, vibrant, tropical look to our shot. So we're gonna bring up the shadows, bring up the whites, and this one has been sent in by Passport in one hand. So let's get over to their Instagram and I'll talk a little bit about their style. So as you can see, lots of blues, lots of oranges. Got to up those shadows, up those whites, and that's really what's going to give us a nice vibrant look. And when you come down, this is the image we're going to be working with as well. As you can see, there's a texture overlay, so I'll also show you how to do that, and I'll put a link for you guys to download one as well, a free one. And as you can see, there's a little bit of fade to those blacks. I'll try to find a better shot that shows you guys. And that just takes the edge off those really dark blacks, and then there's a little bit of a fade to those whites as well, and that just sort of flattens the image, gives a little bit of a fade to both the highlights and shadows. So yeah, if we come back up, you can see, you guys can go give them a follow down in the description. I'll put all their links down there. And if we come back down, I'll actually talk a little bit about the settings for this shot. So they are using the Sony A7 Mark II as the camera body, Sony 28-70, 3.5 to 5.6, and they shot that at 28mm, so it's on the wide end of their lens, and that's just to try to capture everything, but it's not overly wide. And then ISO 64, so really bright day, no need to have a high ISO. 4.5 f-stop, so trying to get it nice and sharp, and then a shutter speed of 1/2500, so really sharp shutter speed because it's really bright, can't let much light in, otherwise you'd overexpose, and then I've just exposed it correctly with that fast shutter speed. Okay, so that's the gear and settings. Let's come back up, and if you guys really like this style, I highly recommend getting their presets. So they offer you their presets and $40 off booking.com. So if you're interested, say, in their presets, come over here, click here, buy our presets now, and once you're over here, you can check out everything they offer you guys. So come over and just have a click through these, see if you like them. Consists of 10 presets for Lightroom Mobile and 10 for Lightroom Classic CC. So I'll be putting a link down to these as well, guys. And if you like the style, I definitely recommend buying a pack because you need multiple presets for different lighting scenarios. So yeah, that's their presets. If you like their style, guys, go check them out. It's down in the description. Let's go back to their Instagram. We are working with this one right here, and yeah, really awesome style, guys. Let's get into Lightroom, see if we can create something vibrant, very bright, by taking out those shadows, increasing the whites, a little bit of a fade, and then just really making those skin tones pop and those teals pop. And yeah, let's get into it. Here's our raw file and the edited one from their Instagram, and as you can see, we don't have exactly the same image, but really close. And one other thing is, you can see this image has a layer effect over top, so we'll do that at the end. Okay, let's get straight into it. Let's up the exposure. Right. Highlights. This bringing down the highlights is a very common thing I see in a lot of these images I shoot. So I'm just gonna bring that down. So I sort of look at things like the sand. Yeah, it's quite hard to see. You might have to go and tweak this later, but the highlights will reveal a lot of detail in the brightest areas. And then you sort of use whites for the pop. So reveal lots of detail with the highlights by bringing them down. Not very obvious in this image. Usually you've got some clouds or a bit more highlights that you can bring back detail in. But this image, it's a little harder. Okay, so shadows, we want to create the nice, vibrant, warm look to the image. So we've got to take out those shadows. And again, that's what the whites were doing as well, adding that pop and really warm feel, the tropical feel to your image. And then we've got the blacks here, so we want to keep a little bit of contrast in the image. So dropping the blacks, just you can see how that adds in contrast. We want a little bit of that so the image still looks natural, and it allows us to bring the shadows really high up to get that vibrant feel. But if we brought shadows up this high and didn't bring down the blacks, then our image starts to look real flat and unnatural. And we've still got to do a little bit of a fade in the S curve yet, so that will soften the blacks even more. But okay, so this image, clarity is definitely coming up. It can be kind of hard to spot clarity to the untrained eye, but it's sort of the crispiness to the image, and it will slightly affect highlights and contrast as well. But we're gonna roll with 12. Okay, now we will do the curve. So we just got to put a fade in the shadows and the highlights, and I can see that by so if you look at the dark areas, it looks like there's almost a layer on it, like the way I see it is I should be able to see detail in there, but I can't because there's like this layer over top of it. So maybe you can see it back there as well in the darker areas. If I just bring it up, so as you can see, I see a very subtle effect. This is an exaggerated effect of adding in a fade into the shadows or blacks. And as you can see, you can't see the detail in there. Yeah, and as I said, this is an exaggerated example, but that's what I'm looking for when and seeing if I need to bring up the black point here for that fade. So I'll bring it up a bit, bring down the shadows to keep a bit of that contrast. Okay, so I'll just explain the rest of this curve. We've got to bring the shadows down because we want that fade in the blacks. But if I don't bring the shadow point down, you can see we just don't have that contrast there, and then you can't even see the fade anyway, really. So shadows down there, midpoint, just pretty much keeping it there in the middle. Highlights pretty much stay where they are, maybe a touch up. But this point is to add a little fade to the white. So here's an exaggerated fade. And we just want a little bit. So it's like adding a layer over top of the whites there. It just gives a slightly, I don't know if you like that effect, that's what it does. It just fades out those highlights. Okay. Moving on. Let's go to split toning and start trying to get these colors. So it's important to do split toning first, or go back and forth between HSL and split toning, because split toning will affect all of the colors in your image. So highlights, we obviously want to go for a really warm feel to the image. So we are going to put in a nice orange or yellow. Bring the saturation up. And then in the shadows, we're just going to put a little bit of blue to balance out the warm highlights. Okay, so split toning is doing a very, very subtle amount there. let's go on to HSL, and I think that's where we're gonna get most of our colors. So very subtle there. You can sort of see it, especially back there. Just warmed it up just a touch. I should maybe add in a bit more there, but I'll show you how to do the rest with the HSL. And actually, before I go any further, I'll just enable profile corrections. And I can tell this because, especially the background, there's a straight line that I can see that is straighter now, more like this image. Okay, let's work with some HSL and pretty much shift everything to a warmer color. So those blues got to go to a teal, those greens have got to go more to a yellow, those reds to even more of a red. Okay, let's get into it. Let's warm up these greens first. As you can see, just way too green. Let's really warm them up. Yellows is another one we definitely need to warm up. So as you can see, at the moment, very yellow. Over here, very orange. Right, oranges. So oranges is probably going to be our skin tones, and they look a lot more on the red side. Let's shift them in that direction. Okay, and then it's important to play around with the reds as well and not just rely on the oranges to get your skin tones. So if we play around with this one, you can see it's affecting the darker skin tones. So, and him down here because he's a bit more in the shade. So we want to shift this to an orange. Now he's got natural looking skin tones there, and they both do now. Okay, let's keep going. Let's go to saturation. So if you look at the greens, especially around here and next to the yellows, you can see it goes very, very desaturated. Let's bring it down, see what we got, and they actually almost look more green when you bring the saturation down, just because they're so warm. They actually look a little more green like that. Okay, and just before I do more colors, I'll just do some luminance because I think it's really important, and it also affects colors. So I'm just going to really bring up the green because that's going to give the shine and brightness to the image. So that's the brightness of the colors. Going to do that to yellow as well. As you can see now, those palm trees bringing up the luminance for the greens, and the yellows just really creates the pop to them and giving that tropical look, taking out a few of those shadows by making those colors brighter. And yeah, let's go back to saturation. Let's bring down these yellows. You can see they're just really saturated there. Now we're starting to get a lot closer to what we have over in this image. Let's quickly mess with the blues now. As you can see, we've got a dark blue. In our image, we need it to be this tealy blue. So what we're going to do is grab the blues and shift it in this direction. Okay, so we look much closer to the color. We're just way too saturated. Let's drop the saturation. And then maybe it was better to drop the saturation first, because then it makes it easier to pick the right hue if you've already got the right saturation sometimes. And then aquas, sometimes the aquas affects the sky as well, but in this situation it's just affecting the water. So since we've got the sky right with the blues here, because the blues fix a little bit of the water, sometimes they affect the same area. But I think we're about good. Now we can just try to match up this color down here. Purples and magentas, there's not a lot in it, so pretty much the top up there, just leave that about in the middle. Magenta, So sometimes magenta gets into the skin tones, so you want to check that sometimes. I'm just going to warm it up a bit by shifting it closer to a red. Yeah, you can't really see much in this image at all, but I'll just leave it there. Saturation of the reds, little bit of skin tone, let's drop that a bit. Oranges, so let's try increasing it a touch. Aquas, so the water back there, I think a bit more saturation. Let's go with 28. Let's drop purple and magenta. So there's not much of it in this image, but say if we were using an image with purple and magenta, we want to bring it down because they can be really overpowering colors. So bringing them down, normally in line with these other ones. So we'll just bring them down a bit. Say if you're to make a preset or something, you would want them down. Luminance, we want rich skin tones, so I'm going to drop the reds. This is a pretty common thing to do, and it gives rich colors to your skin tones. And then we'll try for a bit of a shine also to the brighter skin tones, so that would be the oranges. Let's go with that. Yellow luminance again, this is giving that really nice vibrant pop to your image, especially if you look on the edges of this here. So yeah, it's just much darker in our one. We'll bring it up. And you really got to remember luminance when you're messing around with the exposure up here. You might think the image requires a lot of whites, but really there's some colors down in the luminance that need bringing up. And I know if it's a tropical looking shot like this, if it's bright and vibrant, I know that I'm going to be messing with the luminance, especially luminances of the greens and the yellows especially. So I've accounted for that when I did the exposures here, because you might sit here just bringing up the whites, my skin tones don't look that bright, and then you're just making your entire image too bright. But we want to select certain colors to give the pop. We want the yellows, because the yellows, as you can see, are affecting the edges of everything, and it will just give your image a really nice pop for this tropical look. And then the same for aquas and the blues. More so the aquas, because the aquas, they're sort of the brighter blues, they're the greenier blues, they're not so deep, so they can look natural if you bring the luminance of them up quite a bit. And then for this image, the sky back there, we can bring up the luminance of this one a bit as well. And then you got to be careful that you don't confuse that with saturation. So as you can see, it looks less saturated when I brought up the luminance. So don't confuse those two. It can be hard to notice the difference, but you just you want to match up detail and things like that. I'll try to explain later. And then these colors, going for the tropical look, if these colors were in the image, you'd bring them up a bit just to be kind of in line with everything else. Okay, I think we're looking really good. Sharpening can be about default. Yeah, we don't need any grain. It's a really smooth looking image, apart from the clarity. Clarity sort of doesn't make it very smooth, but that it gives it the crisp look. I think we're good for saturation and vibrance. Blacks. And yeah, I think we're looking really good. So we'll move on now, and actually up the corner here you can see it's much darker, and I'm thinking the only way you do this is to do a filter. So I've already placed the filter, and all that I'll do is just bring down the exposure, And maybe this is just to draw your eye down into what's going into the image to frame our subjects a little better. I think that's maybe why they did it. Otherwise you just got negative space up there, and you want to keep your eye guided down into what is important in the image, which is these guys. Okay, I think that's how that sky up there in the corner is dark. And yeah, now we just want to get the texture over top of this image. So we're gonna go into Photoshop and add a layer. But what happens when you add a layer is it will take out some contrast. It will kind of add a fade to your image. So you want to make sure you have enough contrast in the image. So if I wanted to match these up right now, I would take down contrast. Right there, I think, is the correct, or maybe, yeah, about there. I think our blacks look similar. Maybe even down some more. But I know when I add in this filter over top with the texture lines and stuff like that, that's going to fade out my image a bit. So I'm going to keep contrast a little extra, and then you guys will see after I've put on the filter, it will soften up my contrast a lot. So I've edited it, keeping that in mind. So if we come up to help now, this is cut off from the recording, but I'm clicking on help. I'm going to the search bar. I'm typing in Photoshop, and I'm going down and clicking on edit in Adobe Photoshop. Open anyway. Okay, so it's going to bring you straight over into Photoshop, and the very first thing you want to do is grab your background image here, drag it down over top here. This icon that duplicates that image, because you don't want to mess with the locked image here. That way you always have something to go back to if you make mistakes. So we're working with this layer, and all you got to do, so over to the left here on my desktop, I have some layers, texture layers. I'll be putting the links down in the description so you guys can download them yourself. They're free. So all I'm doing is dragging and dropping it on top of the image, and here we have it now, and we can just position this how we like. And these are high quality texture overlays. So say, so that's covered the image now, but say you want bigger texture and less of it, you just make it much larger, and then you get bigger textures and more space between them. So I might twist this around. I quite like this area of it. I want that up in the corner there. And I want it a little larger. And I'll put it right there. I'll hit the tick here, and then that's going to be placed in there. We have it over here. If you hit opacity, we can bring it down a bit. Probably recommend bringing it down. And then what you can do, if you have this layer selected, if you have this little icon here, it will stop you from making changes to it. So what you can do is right click and go to rasterize layer, and then now you can make changes to the layer. I'm not too sure why that is, it's just something you got to do. And then what you can do is come over to eraser, and you can just brush out bits you don't like. So check your opacity. So opacity is pretty low right now, but what you might want to do is make sure there's not too much on top of your subjects. So you might not want it on their face. You might think there's just too much in general. So you can make it much harsher. You can make your brush a lot bigger. So I'm doing that by using the bracket key. You could maybe just randomly get rid of a bit. And yeah, that's how you put a texture overlay. Links down in the descriptions to those. And once you're done with this, once you're happy, go up to File and just hit Save. Not Save As, just Save. Okay, and once you do that, just click back into Lightroom, and bang, here it is right here. And yeah, it's all done. It's right next to us already. So yeah, and if we come here, you can see this is the image before going into Photoshop, and then coming back from Photoshop after you hit save. And I sort of made a mistake. I sort of underestimated or overestimated how much fade it would put in. It actually hasn't faded my image very much. I think I chose a different layer to last time. But what I'll do, as you can see, our fades are quite different. I'll just do that now. You can sort of push a JPEG image. I don't think it's a RAW anymore, but you can push it a bit. And as I just want to put in a bit more flatness into the image, because that's what I was expecting the overlay to do to the image. And then keep the midpoint in the middle. Okay, contrast. I think that looks pretty good, guys. And yeah, I used a different filter last time which really did fade it out, but that time it didn't. But that's how I would match it up again after putting the filter on. So yeah, that's a bit about it, guys. Hope you really liked this one. Remember, you can go and purchase their presets down in the description. There'll be a direct link to them. I recommend buying packs of filters because every lighting condition is different. So yeah, their pack of presets, if you like this style, will really work for you very well, because they'll have presets for every lighting condition. They'll have, and then yeah, you won't run into the problem of it working on some images and not on others. So check them down in the description, guys, and down in the comments, comment people you want to see, so then I can reach out to them on Instagram. They can send in a photo and I can do a tutorial on them. And yeah, that's about it, guys. If you're interested in LUTs and video editing, check out my website. I don't really post that stuff over here. I want to keep it photo based. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Comment down below and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.